Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exactly what others say to spite them. And in today's episode, guys, horrible owners and bosses are messing with the wrong employees and they're getting destroyed. I'm talking businesses getting shut down. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's lineup. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. So I've worked in a small barber shop for a year and 3 months now. When I was hired, I wasn't informed of the previous working conditions that I was to be filling in for. My boss and the shop owner was a 62-year-old woman. She neglected to inform me that her previous staff had some issues. One was a schizophrenic, another was a gold-digging woman who called everyone baby, and another was a former mayor who was caught sleeping with another man's wife. She also had this horrendous tendency of complaining about everything at work. Some days, it was her trans grandkid. Other days, it was how her boyfriend won't propose, but when he did, she just wasn't good at commitment. There was also racist comments flung about, homophobic comments, you get the picture. Some days, however, she was extremely laid back. I weathered through the rough patches of slow days and her bad attitudes. I also attempted to discuss her issues in healthy ways, so she wouldn't share them with clients. I would even open and close the shop and covered for her when she decided to take random vacations. Eventually, things began to settle, until about a year into working there. She became sporadic and impulsive, much more than usual to say the least. She would often fly into bouts of anger and throw tantrums at clients for no apparent reasons. One day, she came in fuming because she decided to break it off with her boyfriend for not building her a lake house. She also hired a new barber, despite us not needing one. She also began dodging haircuts she didn't like, and a lot more. The final straw that broke the horse's back was definitely when she tried to sell the shop from under us, without telling us. Now the issue here is that she was telling her clients, but not her employees. And as someone who works for her, I pay her to rent a chair. The new barber was freaking out, as clients had begun leaving, and this was an issue I couldn't overlook. So as a shop manager, I took it upon myself to finally confront her when we were alone in the shop. I asked her what her plans were and that we just needed to know for communication's sake, so at least we could plan appropriately. To which I was told, don't worry, I have a plan. You guys can still work here. Now that answer wasn't an answer for me though, so I respond with, alright, as long as you have a plan and can communicate with us, then I'm fine with that. Later that night, she texted me the following. She says to me, we will no longer be discussing my business. If I mention my business to customers, that's my business. When something has to do with you, I will let you know. Keep your opinions to yourself. I'm not mad. This is simply my business, and I would appreciate it if we kept it that way. If you don't like the way I run my business, and if I get on your nerves so bad, you should not be working here. From this day forward, I will do things my way, without any input from you. Thanks. So in short, I told her thanks for an answer and I'll see her in the morning. The next morning, I opened up the shop as usual and I didn't say a single thing to her for the entire day. Halfway through, the new girl comes up to me and tells me that my boss said that I had been kissing up to her all morning. And she got annoyed, so I was giving her the silent treatment. My boss was acting shady because she knew I was up to something. So she left early that day to avoid confrontation. I helped the new girl finish the day out, and then I packed up all my stuff in my car and left her a letter of resignation. I then texted her to say, I've left my letter of resignation on your desk. I appreciate the opportunity to work and gain clients, but from now on out, I'll be doing things my way, without any input from you. Good luck in whatever you do, and please do not contact me. Since then, I've been offered jobs by 3 different shops. All my clients from her shop contacted me saying that my boss doesn't understand why I left, and she shut down the shop randomly. It's always satisfying to hear that a place just shuts down right after the best employee leaves, guys. And it's probably safe to say that OP was helping to keep that place running properly. Like with the owner being that unstable, guys, I'm sure it was only time before the place collapsed. And don't you guys just love it when employees get to throw their bosses nasty words right back in their faces? Nothing more satisfying than that. So this happened about 4 years ago. I do construction and we start fairly early. So my boss got tired of people walking in at 6:05 or 6:03 when we start right at 6 o'clock. Even though my boss was a few minutes late more consistently than any one of us were. So my boss says to us, if you aren't standing in front of me at 6 o'clock when we start, then I'm docking 15 minutes from your time for the day. The next day, I accidentally forgot my tape measure in my car, and I had to walk back across the job site to grab it. I make it inside after 6 o'clock, and the boss chewed me out and told me that he was serious yesterday, and he docked me 15 minutes. So I took all my tools off right there, and I sat down on a bucket. He then asked me why I wasn't getting to work, and I said to him, I'm not getting paid till 6:15, so I'm not doing any work until 6:15. Like, I enjoy what I do, but I don't do it for free. Hearing me say that, he tried to argue with me about it until I said, hey, if you're telling me to work without paying me, that's against the law. And do you really want to open the company and yourself up to that kind of risk? Maybe I'm the kind of person to sue, or maybe I'm not. But if you keep on telling me to work after you docked my time, then we will find out one way or the other. My boss shut up pretty quickly after that, and everybody else saw me do it and him cave, so now they weren't gonna take his crap either. So over the next few days, the guys that would have been 1 or 2 minutes late just texted the boss, hey, sorry boss, I would have been there at 6:02 and gotten docked, so I'll see you at 6:15. I'll get to work then. And we would all watch as the guys just sat in their cars until 6:15, and they came in when their time started. So between people doing what I did, or just staying in their cars instead, he lost a ton of productivity and morale, because he decided that losing 15 minutes of productivity per person and feeling like a big man was better than losing 1 or 2 minutes of productivity. So after a few weeks of that, he got chewed out by his boss over the loss of productivity, and how bad the docked timesheets were looking. That reflected poorly on him as a leader because we were missing deadlines over it, and it showed that he doesn't know how to manage his people. Suddenly, his little self-implemented policy was gone, and we worked like we were supposed to, and we caught back up fairly quickly. Worker solidarity for the win. Not one person took his crap and worked that time for free after he tried to swing his weight around on them. But obviously, I was a target after that. And I only made it 2 more months before he stacked up enough BS reasons to get away with firing me. So yeah, I used to work on construction sites, guys, and I can say that this BS happens a lot. Like, there's a lot of power-tripping idiots that become supervisors and foremen on sites, and they make up their own little rules. And I'm glad OP stood up against his boss and taught him a little lesson. But it sucks that he got put on the chopping block for that though. I used to work at this one coffee shop. It was my first chain coffee shop after working at local or family-run ones. Simply put, it was hell. The owners would micromanage everything without knowing anything about how the business ran, and they would never listen to their staff and only cared about the money. Typical out-of-touch owners of a business. I was hired to replace a manager that had walked out of one of their locations, leaving it with only part-time staff. I was told that I was being hired on as the acting manager, until they either hired someone else or they felt I would be a good fit for the position after my 6 months probation. Now, I won't go into everything that went wrong because there's a lot to summarize, but it was terrible. I was expected to cover all no-shows, which often had me working 70+ hours a week, and I wasn't allowed to fire anyone, no matter how bad the things they did were. Any changes I wanted to implement were immediately shut down, like replacing old parts in the espresso machine, shortening hours to save money on labor, and bringing items in that customers would always ask for. I was stressed, overworked, and irritated as hell whenever the owner comes in to talk to me about sales for the store. We weren't making enough to warrant the hours I'd scheduled, and he wasn't gonna pay me any more overtime. He then told me that I would only work the hours I'm scheduled for, and if someone no-showed, I had to have someone else cover the shifts. I tried to explain to him that I came in when no one else would cover because the people he allowed to work here had terrible availability. I told him that making the schedule was hard enough, but getting someone other than myself to come in on their day off was next to impossible. On top of that, I had to learn the ropes myself. There was no one to train me, so all the managerial knowledge, ordering, and scheduling I learned myself. No one other than me knew how to order coffee, had the numbers for repair guys, or do anything other than make coffee and use the till. I was the only one that knew. Of course, the owner would never listen when I told him, and he wasn't hearing any of it. Basically, the conversation went like this. The owner told me, All I'm hearing is excuses. This is your store, and if you can't handle running it, I'll start looking for someone else who can handle it. I replied, wasn't that the plan though? It's been 3 months since my probation period ended, and you never gave me a manager position, so I assumed you were looking for someone to take over. The owner says, are you telling me how to run my store? I think it's in your best interest to take some time off. You need to start thinking about your position here and whether you actually want to start moving up. Now, I had mentioned in the interview that I was looking forward to working my way up in the business. At that, I say to him, I can't take time off. There's no one to cover me. To which he says, you're taking the time off. That's final. I then ask him, is that a paid break? To which he says, no, just consider this a timeout for you to get yourself sorted. Take the 2 weeks to rest and we'll see what your position's gonna be like when you get back, if you still have a position. Now, I really did try to tell him. I said to him, owner, I really can't afford to take that amount of time off. For the store's sake, I can't even take 2 days off without having to come in to cover. The owner tells me, don't worry about my business right now. It'll run fine without you. Now, to put in perspective, I was basically the manager at this point. I made the schedules, I did the orders, I knew the codes to the safe and the alarm, and I wasn't allowed to hire anyone to assist me. And no one worked enough time to be able to even cover half my shifts. I knew this, the staff knew this, the customers knew it, but the owner didn't. So I did what he said and I took my 2 weeks off. I spent those 2 weeks looking for another job. I managed to find one after a few days that paid significantly more. I then sent my resignation email to payroll and the owner, knowing that he never checks his emails. I then delete my accounts off the point of sale system and spent the rest of the leave catching up on well-deserved sleep. I also blocked all work numbers because if I'm not getting paid, I'm not working. So according to my coworkers, everything started going wrong the next day. One of the openers didn't show and the next staff member didn't have keys. And the owner wasn't answering his phone, so they left a message. The owner didn't show up until one of the regulars called, asking if the place was closed down. He showed up 4 hours after they were supposed to open. The orders weren't done, inventory was missed, 4 no-shows, you name it. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. The owner tried every way he could to get a hold of me, even using a customer's phone to contact me. So after 2 weeks, I turned my phone back on and I get a call the same day from the owner. We agree to meet the next day. So the owner basically says, so, have you had some time to think? I tell him I have. It's really given me perspective on my position here. The owner says to me, good, we can start you back on your normal hours for now, and we're looking for a manager to take on more of your responsibilities. I say to him, oh, that's good, but I'm actually quitting. Hearing me say that, he was silent for a few minutes. I think he was waiting for me to tell him I was kidding, but it sucks for you, buddy. I'm serious. I say to him, I've already emailed payroll and removed my login from the computer, and here are my keys. Good luck. And with that, I left. The owner did try spam calling me a few times, but he stopped once I told him to check his email. I was on okay terms with some of the staff that worked there, and apparently the majority of them quit after I left. The owner did find a replacement pretty quickly from what I'm told, but without anyone to train them as the owner didn't know anything about the business, they were pretty much left to fail from the get-go, and they left pretty soon after they started. Rinse and repeat with new employees. The business struggled for a long time after I left. It was just getting worse and worse as the years went on. The place no longer exists nowadays. Oh man, the owner definitely deserved the fallout, guys. And also, I'm pretty sure the owner wasn't allowed to give OP a 2-week unpaid timeout like that. If I were in OP's shoes, not only would I be looking at new job postings, but I'd be looking into labor laws at that point. And guys, all I'm thinking about after reading the story is how the owner could not have been more wrong when he told OP, don't worry, the business will run fine without you. Famous last words before that man's business crumbled. My first job when I was a teenager was a dishwasher in a coffee shop that just opened for a month in my seaside town. The owners left their other jobs with a bit of cash, and they set up the place thinking it'd be easy money trickling in. Now, the problem was, of course, that they didn't want to work in it, but also didn't want to hire some experienced manager to run it either. As you can assume, problems ensued from the get-go. So my malicious compliance was late on in the summer. My job was to clear and clean all the tables, wash and dry the dishes, and make sure the floor was spotless. The problem, of course, was that it takes at least 2 people to do that on a calm day. Never mind busy weekends in the midst of summer holidays. and as the owner didn't work there, he assumed I could do it all by myself. So the entire summer, I busted my ass doing all this and barely making it work. I had adopted so many shortcuts that the dishwasher never actually got used. The baristas were telling me to hand wash stuff as they needed it right away to serve it. We barely had enough cups to serve people on busy days. So that meant that I was in the kitchen most of the time scrubbing and having no time to run out and lift the dirty trays, but I still managed to do both. Of course, the big bad owner would walk in randomly in the day, and I would get berated for the floor being dirty or a tray on the table. It didn't matter if the tray was there for 10 seconds, it was my fault. Now, I had dealt with this all so far, sucking it up and just pushed on, thinking that I must have just been slow. That was until the busiest day of the year, when we had a show in town. The place was full, and with the town so busy, people didn't even mind standing with no seats to have a drink. The boss gets called in as we're swamped and we're not coping. We had no cups, long lines of angry customers, people sitting at dirty tables. It was bad. Now, of course, when the boss walks in, all he does is point at every table with an empty cup on it and says to me, "That's why there's a shortage in cups," only to further add that the floor is a disgrace. So I run to the floor to clean and ask him to cover the dishwashing for a minute. He's appalled, but he complies. It's only when I get back that I see that he's never worked back here before. He spent the entire time that I was on the floor just packing a handful of dishes into the dishwasher. The problem being is it takes ages to pack and wash, and he hasn't cleared any space for my new dishes to be placed. So with that, I of course crap myself, and I ask him to help move stuff so I can set the new tray down. I then start hand washing cups to hand to the barista, and that's when he scowls at me saying everything must go through the dishwasher. This is why it's so slow and you're behind. He then walks off to mingle at the front of the house. And here's my malicious compliance. If you want it that way, then you can have it that way. I start packing up the dishwasher, trying to organize the stacks of trays. And not 2 minutes go by before the 4 baristas are screaming for cups and teapots. I tell them that the boss's new rules are no more hand washing. That's when the boss flies in and he whips open the dishwasher before it's done, telling me to start hand washing again because we're behind. So I start hand washing and he immediately follows with, "There's tables out there with dirty dishes. Why aren't you collecting them?" Now, I had been pretty frightened of him to now, but having seen him start to lose his cool a little, it dawned on me that I was being overworked, and the guy didn't even know it yet. So instead of making any point or argument, I realized that the best way to let him know is by showing him. So I leave to get a full tray from out front. It takes a while to stack a few table trays together. And while I was doing that, he was sweating in the back, following baristas' cleaning orders, hand washing dishes as they were needed. Of course, when I get back, there is again nowhere to put the trays, and he's now scowling at everybody, as if we had constructed the building ourselves. And again, when I say there's nowhere to put trays, I mean including the floor, where trays were stacked. He then runs out when I get the trays unpacked into some stacks of dishes, and he's back to the front of the house. I have then to start cutlery, and anyone that's worked in a restaurant or cafe knows the bane of cutlery. I'm nearly done scrubbing the cutlery when boss reappears, and without looking, he pours coffee and tea into my clean cutlery in the sink. At this point, I can see that he's defeated. He knows how precious my time is suddenly, and he knows that he effed me over by doing that. His eyes are wide with an aura of, oh my god. He walks back out, still holding the now empty mugs, and he leaves me to start the cutlery anew. Maybe a minute goes by, and that's when he walks back in and he asks me to tell him how I do my job. Finally, I'm thinking. So I wash and talk, telling him all the little tips and tricks for making sure the stuff is still moving out to the front. I can tell from his face as I relay how the place works that he genuinely didn't know. I can see somewhere in his head that he just realized how he must have been treating myself and the younger staff all summer to this point. He's sort of looking a bit broken. 15 minutes into working at his own cafe, and he's broken. The rest of the shift, he had his wife come down, and the 3 of us worked the full shift to close. At the end of the day, he actually apologized for making me work like that, and he promised he'd always have staff to help with the busy shifts. I actually went to work with him every summer after that until I left college. I actually really appreciated his reaction that day, and I always did a little extra work than I needed to, and in return, he always paid me a little better for the extra work. I just want to say that I love this post, guys. Like, the story starts out rough, but it ends beautifully. And this post was just like an episode of Undercover Boss, guys, where the boss joins the workers on the floor and gets a glimpse into their everyday struggles. And honestly, it always blows my mind to hear about a manager or owner running a place that they have no idea how to run or what it takes. And listen, before we close off today's episode, guys, I can't leave you without your daily dose of insane Karens, so here's the last story. So this happened last night. I have terrible neighbors. They like to get drunk and fight, and they'll fight anyone, they'll fight each other, or they'll even come after my children or myself. Last night was no exception. They were getting rowdy and hollering at each other, and I'm so sick of it. They were throwing stuff on the road, playing in traffic, screaming, and making a scene. I'm not feeling that great, so I was in bed with the window open. So I turned on my lamp, got up to the window to close it, and that's when she sees me. The Karen. Of course, that starts a new round of yelling obscenities at me. I just shook my head. Now, my window is quite big and heavy, and like I said, I'm not feeling great, so it was taking some time to close it. My Karen neighbor then yells something like, "Are you enjoying the show? Why don't you record this? Are your security cameras not working? Why don't you call the police if you really want to see a show?" Now, I had no intention of involving myself. I just wanted to not hear them. But then I remembered that my internet was down and my security cameras weren't working at the moment. So I propped up a spare phone on my window and start recording while calling the police, per Karen's request. I gave the police a play-by-play, which they could clearly hear in the background with their names and address. Within a few short minutes, there were several police cars surrounding their place and mine. The woman ran inside to hide, and the man ran to his van to drive off, and the two children were just roaming my front yard in just their underwear. I knew they had small children, but I assumed they were in bed because I hadn't seen or heard them. And did I mention that it was like 10 p.m. and raining? The police showed up and took them all away. The kids were loaded up as well. Now, this isn't the first time, but I'm really hoping it's the last time, at least for the kids' sake. So there you have it, guys. Don't dare people to call the cops, because some people actually will, especially if you're freaking annoying and bad neighbors. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, it's an r/ entitled People episode, where an insane Karen steals OP's car because his happens to be better than hers. It's such a funny story, so go check it out. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.